All right, back today with a boy Virtue. Go ahead and say hey, everybody.
Yo, what's up, guys? It's me. It's Virtue.
So today we're gonna be doing a similar video that we did on our Naruto versus Taka video, because I thought about it after we did that video. I was like, what if the roles were reversed? What if Pain decided to roll up on the Cloud Village and decided he wanted to try to capture B instead of Naruto? So that's pretty much what we're doing here. So we're doing this in 3 separate scenarios. We're gonna do Killer B versus Pain first. Like, what if he replaced Taka and they just like discreetly, somehow all 6 pounds of Pain go completely unnoticed, unless it's by a couple guards. They knock out the guards, they kill the guards, whatever. They just infiltrate the hidden Cloud Village, with no difficulty, and they just encounter B at his little training grounds and whatnot. And could he win? So right off the bat, the best thing to go ahead and cover is that obviously B's not gonna have any intel. That is like the main thing for Pain, for people who fight Pain anyway, is that most of the time, like as in like 99% of the time, people who fight Pain go in knowing almost nothing about Pain. That is a huge problem in and of itself. Like, because fighting Pain when you don't have any intel going in is a huge deal. Because like, even if you start gaining intel on one ability from Pain, Pain's gonna come in and use another ability and throw you off course right there and just keep you in a perpetual state of confusion. So like, that's gonna apply here. B is not gonna know anything about Pain at all, save that he's from the Akatsuki.
Intel's huge in Naruto, especially on like many different fronts and many battles, and Pain is the one example that we usually get for this. Like, if you ask somebody an example of Intel giving a large advantage, the example they're probably going to go to is Pain, because Jiraiya literally gave his life for this intel. Like, he literally continues onward knowing he's going to die because he needs to get this intel so that someone else could have at least an advantage to take him down. Because he literally states that he doesn't think anybody else in the world will get this far, which is also a way to suggest that Jiraiya doesn't think any other nation leader is stronger than Pain. But he thinks that he's the only one that can get this far, therefore he needs to continue to get them some sort of advantage to ever have a chance against this guy. So yeah, I think the intel is huge. So I think it's a problem when you don't have intel on somebody like him, especially when he has 6 bodies and his abilities are literally even terrifying, like KCM1 Naruto and stuff like that.
Yeah, so on the other hand though, Pain won't have much knowledge on B, but I think when it comes to B, it's a little bit less terrifying. Like, obviously, like, Pain kind of not underestimated per se, but he did not take for account how strong even 1/2 of the 9 tails was going to be. He even said so himself. He's like, this power is magnificent, and B is at this moment touted as the strongest Jinchuriki. So like, Pain will have a bit of a fight on his hands, and I think the biggest aspect, like the biggest problem for Pain, is obviously going to be B's speed. Here's the thing is, we're talking about B doesn't really go all out from the jump in most of his fights, similar to how he was with Taka, similar to how he was with Kisame. Even like, I think Taka's the more noteworthy because he was fighting like multiple people at once and he was still just kind of like playing around. He might do that here, and while Pain is going to capture B, I think he's going to be a little bit more serious from the jump than B is going to be from the start. Attitude might play a part in this, like, because like, and Pain's going to be at full power here instead of like not fatigued like he was before he fought Naruto. So that's going to be another thing too. And so Pain will probably have the same mindset when he fought Naruto to get his Pain's information before the fight even starts.
Yeah, and even if we're gonna say like, well, does he do chaotic Shinra Tensei? I would actually venture to say he does. If you look at his chapter 329 appearance, whenever he first is introduced among the rest of the Akatsuki members, he's actually monologuing about the nations, his dream, what is it to be part of the 5 nations, and he's starting to give some hints that he's sympathetic to Kumogakure. But the point that he actually lays out is that the Konoha, the Konohagakure they're not heathens. They do have the will of fire. But then he goes on to question about the will of fire and if it's actually a good thing or not. However, he says they're not heathens, which would imply that he actually believes the other nations are heathens, which is really interesting. So perhaps he would actually want to level, like the entire battlefield even more just based on these shinobi. Perhaps you can say, well, it's just Killer B, so he might not have that sort of tendency like he might in some of the later matches. But I would still say that Pain does do a lot of things that are too stamina draining, that even Conan's like, Pain, you shouldn't do that. That'll literally drain your lifespan, like the Chibaku Tensei, stuff like that, where he's literally going way overboard. So Pain is noted to go all out too much, and B is noted to not go all out enough. You know what I mean? So you kind of have that problem here. B also starts his fights with trying to test his opponent, learn their tendencies, learn their reactionary patterns, like with Kisame tossing the pencil to see which way his head would move, stuff like that. So I would actually venture to say that Pain would have a really big advantage, especially in the early part of the fight. So on top of the intel not being there, I think he's already going to be at a disadvantage going into the middle and later part of the fight. And I would also venture to say that Pain is physically stronger than B. I assume you would agree with that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So I mean, like, realistically, right, with him being much stronger in that sense, we know that there's different ways to go about his power. Like, for example, right, we can use something along the lines of the Jiraiya statement about him being the strongest. He's also stated to be the strongest man in the Akatsuki in the chapter 364 synopsis statement, which would put him above Kisame, who can be a later version of B, who's likely even stronger, as though he can't go all out with Biju bombs and stuff like that, at least in those earlier forms, like V1, V2 even. V2 didn't even come out against Sasuke. We know that what's interesting is B was training in the Sasuke fight, so he actually was probably slightly fatigued, whereas against Kisame he wasn't. Yet Kisame can still react to him and combat him, deal with some of his attacks, absorb his stuff, and yet Pain has a much better absorption ability, right, and is much physically stronger than Kisame, and likely even his fused form as well, which was faster than V2 in the bubble. So we know that he would have a great physical advantage over him. So in those middle to late rounds, I don't think any of the transformations would be able to gap that and give him the advantage once again.
It's funny you brought that up, because I was actually thinking that if for some reason, because you mentioned V2 didn't come out against Taka, which definitely didn't, he only went into V1, but even if V1 or V2 come out, I mean, we saw what Nagato was able to do when B tried to blitz him, and depending on which one he goes for, I suppose, like if he goes for the Preda path, I mean, that's just gonna absorb all that chakra from him right there. Like you said, if without intel and without going all off from the jump, I mean, I'm not sure if he even gets to any of the transformations aside from maybe V1 and V2. If the only way that I would see a transformation coming out, really, because it would, like, looking back at it, it is kind of odd that like B chose to go all out into the Eight-Tails during his fight with Taka when he already had them all beat. I mean, by the time he ripped open Sasuke's chest, he literally probably could have ended all of them without going into his giant, Biju form. So here, I feel like the only reason he would go that far is if he felt like he was either running out of like ideas. And I had brought to Virtue, like, I was like, well, I said, like, the only reason I feel like he would use the full-on Eight-Tails is if he got Chibaku Tensei and he needed to break out. But if he goes into the form before that, then Pain can still use Chibaku Tensei, but a bigger one if he needs to. And since this is going to be at full power, without B knowing how to stop Chibaku Tensei like he would learn in the war arc from Itachi, I don't know. I'm not entirely sold that B can get out of it, even if even if he's in the Eight-Tails form. Now, if he, like I said, if he gets caught in it before then and he uses the Eight-Tails form to break out, yeah. And realistically, like, Pain only uses that as a panic button. Like, he's only using that as a last resort. Right. That's all assuming the fight will even get that far. And like Virgil said, if Kisame is able to beat B, and it's no shade on Kisame, that's actually speaking a lot to that. Like, if Kisame is able to beat B, Pain shouldn't have an issue. Even
to add, like, if you actually look at the Utakata scene in the anime, and while yes, it is the anime, it should at least take a secondary canon, meaning that as long as there's nothing in the manga to actually harm its credulity, then it should fall as something authentic. And we know that if you actually add the Jinchuriki together, we know Pain probably actually did take on the Six Tails. Also, it just works numerically as well. So if you look at the Utakata fight, at least in the anime, he does jump him. It wasn't like the Naruto fight where he goes in fatigued. Something that the 10th Mini Chronicle Guide says that the chaotic Shinra Tensei drained all of the Diva's chakra. So all of his main body's chakra was literally wiped to zero. That's why you see so much Ashura fighting and stuff like that. So if you look at the Utakata fight, you kind of realize that he's literally jumping him like what happens in like the Pain memes, where they're like all 6 at the same time using every ability they have. That's exactly what happens. The animal summons are out, massive missiles are being fired, you know, the human paths jumping him, Tendo's, you know, shooting Shinra Tenseis at him, and weirdly enough, you can actually even argue that Tendo can even use the Ashura Path missiles, something, a weird thing that most people don't know, because he actually does do it in that fight, and there's no reason why he shouldn't be able to do it, but that's a totally different point. So if you look at that, the way he's going to be fighting isn't going to be like the Naruto fight either, so he's actually going to be doing a lot better, at least in terms of his aggression, and he's also going to be a lot stronger because he won't have that same initial fatigue where he was literally drained to zero, at least in Tendo. So yeah, I mean, I agree with that, and I think that's a pretty good comparison to note.
And so that might actually play on to the second round we're going to talk about, which I think overall Pain has the edge here. So like going on to the next round, right. Pain versus A and B, the Raikage and Killer B at the same time. Now, initially, y'all can test. I was thinking that this would give them more of an advantage, but like I said earlier, not having intel is going to be a huge problem for both of them. And unlike B, A only has like one tactic of fighting, and that's just speed blitzing. Like he does not have any kind of long range fighting whatsoever, and so like him trying to speed blitz the paths, like, well, it's effective if he can actually hit them. The problem is that like with all 6 of them on the field, they have more opportunities to guard each other's back with the field of vision. And you had mentioned this that I completely forgot about in the first round, but the Pain summons, like, we've talked about this before. Like Pain usually goes into every fight from the jump with summons. Like he did against Jiraiya, he did against Naruto, he did against the village itself. So there is no reason to think that he's not gonna just, you know, use any of the summons. Like, and that's assuming he's not pulling out all of the summons at once, you know.
Well, even for the summons, those also give him intel. Like, you know how B was testing reactionary patterns with the pencil? Pain can do this with the summons. Like, he can literally just monitor the summons and then have all their reactionary patterns figured out, at least in that early game, really quick. He can have a lot of them out, you know what I mean? And we know how many summons there are, you know what I mean? Chameleon, bird, dog, rhino, ox, panda, centipede, you know, there's like literally a million summons this dude has.
Yeah. So, man, like, the only way, so like if we did the worst case scenario, like Pain summons out all of them, then that would probably prompt B to go into the Eight-Tails, and like that's a problem for the summons for sure, but like you said, I feel like at that point they would just serve as distractions, so that, because at that point it's just going to be the Eight-Tails and A versus the 6 Paths of Pain and the summons. Now if that did happen, B is going to be obviously focusing on the summons, and that's just going to be able to leave the 6 Paths of Pain to be able to deal with A, which I think, you know, we can agree that Pain would beat A. I guess A is fast. Like, I'm not saying he won't take any of the Paths of Pain down, but like when they're all coordinated with each other and Pain at full power with no intel from the Raikage, like going in for the Raikage, like, I don't know. I don't think he'd be able to get all 6 Paths of Pain out of the field. By the time like he gets confused at one of the abilities that Pain throws out, Pain probably will catch him off guard somehow. Like, it'll be tough because, like, again, like the Raikage, he's shown avoiding the blast from Jugo at point blank. So like even if he gets caught with something real quick, I mean, there's no question he might be able to get out of it, but it's like, how long can he keep that up before Pain, you know, catches him off guard,
catches him with something serious? Yeah. Right.
So I mean, I think realistically, the path that Pain that takes him out probably is going to be the Diva path, because I don't think that like the Ashura Path's missiles is going to be fast enough to catch him. I don't think that the Naraka path is going to be able to get him in a chokehold long enough for him to get his soul out. Same with the Preta path. Like, I don't think he's going to be able to absorb any chakra from him. So like, you know, realistically, I think the one that beats A is going to be the Diva path.
I mean, I think that's a pretty fair take. Like, one thing we were noting the summons earlier. So imagine he has multiple summons on the field. So like, let's say he has replicating dog, centipede, ox, rhino, and bird. Okay, and then Pain in Tendo can fly. this is something me and Lightning were discussing, that most people don't really give him the credit he has, but Pain can just fly. He literally is just flying above the leaf. Everybody knows the scene, but they forget how he got there, I guess. And I mentioned that he might actually be able to use the Ashura Path abilities and random abilities of the Rinnegan in Tendo. He just doesn't. And this sounds a little weird, but like, it actually gets kind of deep once you really look into it. But if you want just like a quick off the dome answer, we know, for example, that like the Ashura has 2 operating vessels at the same time. What do I mean? Well, we has obviously the Ashura Path. Okay, it has all the Ashura abilities, but Nagato himself also has the Ashura Path, right? And this goes for everything. We know he actually has the Ashura Path because he has the bolts literally in like his collarbone, okay, right under his clavicle. Now we know he obviously has like Shinra Tensei and all those abilities, so there are multiple operating vessels outside of the paths, so there's no reason for them to be exclusive to him. So imagine Pain's flying above, shooting down missiles, stuff like that. If you don't think he has them, that's fine, whatever. Imagine him shooting down Shinra Tensei's, that's even worse. Then he can see that A won't use any ninjutsu, okay? He'll know how B will also react to certain attacks like this, so then he'll have all the reactionary patterns and tendencies figured out, whilst they've already expended a lot of chakra, where he really hasn't. The chakra is really coming just out of the summons, right? So he's actually got a really good advantage in this sense, where then once he engages them, they can even be slightly fatigued, and he'll be in better shape than them, not having completely drained all of Tendo's chakra. And I know we mentioned like what can he like do to the cloaks and stuff. Well, we know he can actually fully absorb a V2 cloak off of B whenever he's revived much later. And if he can absorb a V2 cloak straight through the V1 cloak and put the dude in base, imagine what he'd do to like the V1 Raikage cloak, V2 Raikage cloak, stuff like that, as they're actually parallel amps, like they can both keep up together in V1, so it's probably likely they can keep up together in V2 as well. So just off that, right, he can knock them out of their cloaks, which causes them to go right back into him, expend more chakra for that. Okay, he's going to have a greater stamina advantage. I don't think anybody would contest that Pain has a stamina advantage against these two. And then he has a much better tactical advantage. Neither of the two have intel. Just because A's there does not change the fact that they're going to be able to find out any intel on Pain. Let's be honest here. A actually is a smarter fighter than what people give him recognition for, but he's not figuring out the intel on the paths. You know what I mean? It literally took a genius like Jiraiya, and Jiraiya's never really given his credit as a genius, but he really is the first person in the entire world to hypothesize that there was another man 16 years ago who manually summoned Kurama. And he literally hypothesized it's Madara. You know what I mean? Something that was really just way out of this world as some sort of theory, but his hypothesis for that was actually relatively correct with Obito, right? A is like a who I would consider as a military genius, and right. Whereas people like Kakashi are like tactical geniuses, where they're able to deduce like the level of like how what a person's ability is. Like they could break down a situation within minutes. Whereas I think A, like you said, is really incredibly smart, but I think he's more of like a village runner, military genius, rather than someone like Kakashi and Sasuke, who are tactical geniuses. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good analogy for it. So, like, I don't know, man. Like, that's if it's just like A and B by themselves. Like you said, if we're not counting the Eight-Tails, I think it's even worse for them, especially if they do bring out the summons. Because, like you said, like A and B, they don't typically go all out from the jump. And I mean, and so imagine the wasted chakra they'd use against, like, the summons. And then, for example, he doesn't just have to use the summons. He can actually expend some more chakra. Send the Ashura Path down. And I'm not gonna lie, the Ashura Path actually is kind of busted. You know what I mean? The Ashura Path is kind of a monster. So send him down there. Then they have laser head beams to to worry about, massive missiles, ginormous bending blades. You know what I mean? All sorts of crazy things to worry about. This dude also, the Ashura is meant for large scale fights like this. He literally has multiple faces. You know what I mean? Like, the Ashura Path is built for this, so send him down there, and like, well, they want another fighter, okay, send the Preta. Diva doesn't even have to engage, the human doesn't even have to engage, Naraka doesn't have to engage, they can all sit back and just wait. Meaning the worst of all of them, being Tendo, literally can just stand there and wait while A and B are being pressured like they've never been pressured. And if you want to look at like the human path, right, for example, one of the least combative paths that most people tend to forget was literally Sage Jiraiya level. He could literally catch a Jiraiya Sage mode punch from behind the back with his eyes closed in a smoke bomb. That's just the human. Okay, we know the Preta can also react to Sage Jiraiya's attacks and absorb them, and even catch his strongest attack in the Big Ball Rasengan, his greatest output of chakra. So literally, if you just look at their sheer power, they're Sage Jiraiya level threats, who are literally, Sage Jiraiya is somebody who he thinks could beat Hanzo, and he states is actually beyond the Prodigal 3. So, Sage Jiraiya is above the Sannin. The Sannin are stated in Fan Book 2, which comes out at chapter 456, to be equal to that of the Gokage. There's a less numerical advantage, meaning that each of the Sannin could take on any of the Gokage with an advantage. You know what I mean? So, it's not a good look. It's not a good look.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a good look.
my biggest thing is the intel, honestly, going in, because all right, I don't want to sleep on A and B, but they might get cooked right from the jump, because their initial response to a fight is to just
no, I think they are. I'm not gonna lie.
Speed blitz. Like, you know, for the Raikage specifically, he speed blitzes people like from the jump. We saw that in the 5 Kage Summit. That's exactly what he did against Sasuke. And so, like, if he does that to either the Diva path or the Preta path, like, he's either going to be one, knocked back by a severe Shinra Tensei, or getting his chakra absorbed. Now, the lightning armor is tough. Like, I'm not saying like it's going to completely one shot A with the lightning armor, but that just goes to like, how is A going to be able to beat Pain if he can just keep doing that? Like, yeah, he can up his speed, which is going to be a problem, and then B being there too. But the field of vision, it being extended, it's going to be kind of hard to close that gap, you know. So I don't know, man. I'm trying to think of like ways, because again, like, that's all without summoning the animals. If the animals are summoned, I don't know. Like, A and B don't have the intel going in. They don't have Ma or Pa there. They don't have summons of their own, aside from the Eight-Tails, I guess. But we've already established what would happen if that were to happen. Right. And if that did happen, I mean, Pain can still use Chibaku Tensei. Like, he could still use Chibaku Tensei if on A and B if that did happen. So
right, and like for note, like Chibaku Tensei, right, is actually noted by Naruto to be like out of this world, right? And note that KCM1 Naruto by this point has been completely inferior to Itachi's V3 Susanoo, which could completely hold him beyond restraint, and he still thinks that, yeah, the Chibaku Tensei is beyond anything he's seen from Itachi's arsenal, which he knows of the Amaterasu and Tsukiyomi and literally screams about how dangerous they are. Yet the Chibaku Tensei, nah, it's not even in the conversation for those two. You know what I mean? So the Chibaku is literally beyond Itachi's V3 Susanoo. If you look at whenever it's being like suctioned up, one thing people don't know is that like it's literally ripping the Susanoo apart. It's literally stretching the jaw and the neck bones. It's literally being completely manipulated. So imagine what it would do to something like the V1, V2 cloaks on both A and B. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I think that's a total wipe. They have nothing like the Yasuka beats. They do have the Bijou Bomb, but that's 30%, right? So, 30%, we have no idea if that would be enough to completely bomb it. It could cause it to collapse, I suppose, but that's B shooting it from the outset using the advantage of the gravitational pull, which is something he probably won't know how to do.
He would have to repeatedly just keep chucking out Bijou bombs, and I don't know if B would have the wherewithal to do something like that. Like, Itachi had to explain it to them. They're panicking. They weren't like, they were letting their panic, you know, decide their fate, really. It's like Itachi had to be like, yo, calm down. Like, you gotta calm down to assess an ability. You know, otherwise you're just gonna, you know, you're not gonna win anything. I mean, they give him a fight. I'm not going to sit here and say they get completely curb stomped. I think what they have to go up against without any intel, I personally think they would do pretty well. But again, it's like the intel that's really giving me the advantage for them here, or the advantage for Pain here, because once you get caught off with one ability, Pain's going to make use of another ability that he hadn't shown yet, right. And then you're just going to be in a perpetual state of confusion. And like we've established, like they're like A and B are not the smartest. They're definitely intelligent, but they're not tactical geniuses.
They're not like hyper geniuses, like who I would argue Jiraiya to be, somebody like that. You know what I mean? Like literal intellectual mutants. Someone like Kakashi. You know what I mean? Like he's someone who also aids in figuring it out in terms of Pain's abilities. And I don't think either A or B is as smart as either Jiraiya or Kakashi, just to be frank.
So now we're on the last scenario, and this is just like, what if Pain did the exact same thing he did against Leaf Village, where he just knocked the door down and just appeared in the middle of the village and just went crazy. They just dispersed
rampant,
the pains. Yeah, they dispersed the pains within the village, and it's like the Cloud Village versus the Six Paths of Pain. So here's the thing. I told this to Virtue. It's like the doing this scenario. I want to do this scenario. I want to do it, but the problem is that aside from like 5 other Jonin, we really don't know any real like actual feats from the other Cloud Village ninja. Unlike the Elite Village, where we have like a good scale for like what 90% of the Jonin specifically in the village, like people like Shikaku, Genma, Ebisu, like just random, like we don't have that for the Cloud Village. We only know about 5 at best. Darui, C, Samui, Omi, a couple of the others. The names are escaping me, but like just again, that's my point.
I was gonna say that says enough. Yeah.
my point is, so like we don't have anything other than those 5, so like we can only assume that all the other Jonin, like the only Jonin that I feel like is even remotely on Kakashi's level is Darui, and even he scales lower to Kakashi. So assuming that Darui is like their top Jonin, then everybody else is going to be scaling lower to Kakashi at best. That's not really counting any of the Chunin that are there, and the older Genin that might take place in it. Maybe the Anbu. I mean, I don't know if the Anbu would be able to pull anything off that the Elite Village Anbu did, but so that's my point. Is like, I want to do this scenario, but you got to forgive us if we don't have much to go off of, because we don't have much to go off of. So the only one we could really like, it's pretty much going to be like the Six Paths of Pain versus A, B, and the other 5 Jonin. That's pretty much, and so like, could they win? And I mean, it depends. Like who would Darui be fighting? Who would Samui be fighting? Who would like? Aside from Darui, they don't have the scaling that I would consider enough to beat any of these Paths of Pain one-on-one, personally. Especially without any intel going in. I know that's probably sleeping on someone like Samui or Omi, but they just don't have like a whole lot of feats that would convince me that without any intel, they would be able to beat any of these paths.
Right. I mean, like, you'd literally be asking something to say, like, yeah, Omoi can cover the distance between that which is between Pain and what we laid out between Pain and A and B in the last round, right? Is Omoi going to really be covering that distance, though? Is Samui really going to be covering that distance, though? No. You know what I mean? Like, if you look at Darui, sure, but Darui's a V1 Raikage level combatant. A V1, okay? You know what I mean? Like a version 1 Raikage, not a version 2, nothing like that. So you're just adding another V1 and lower opponent at best to this, right? And it's like, well, Pain already has a numbers advantage going in. So if it's like, okay, you have A, B, Darui, Samui, Omoi, and then toss another in there, whatever, right? And then, yeah, you have an equal numbers, but is Darui a Sage Jiraiya level combatant? Is Darui a Sage Mode Naruto level combatant? Probably not. So they're already at a disadvantage, okay, in terms of quantity and quality. And the reason why I say quantity is because the Animal Pass summons can still come out, of the which there's like 10. You know what I mean? So it's pretty bad. And Pain also has better strategies inside the summons than what most people give him credit for. Like the Chameleon, he can hide inside the head and still blast out Shinra Tensei's, which is literally monstrous. You know what I mean? And it's like, what are they going to do? They're also probably going to stop thinking as clearly if he's just blasting Shinra Tensei's out at Kumo. You know what I mean? And for example, he can still chaotic Shinra Tensei, which is also still in character, since again, he probably hates these nations just as much, if not maybe even more than what he thinks about Konoha. So imagine you just chaotic Shinra Tensei. What is A actually going to think in his head? They don't have a Yamato to just rebuild this with wood style.
Nope.
You know what I mean?
Nope.
He's going to be pissed. He's going to be freaking out. You know what I mean? So I think Pain wins this, and I don't think the other Shinobi really have enough of a gap. And I think also them being in the middle of Kumogakure is a big issue for them, not for Pain.
Well, and that's the thing, is like, once Pain figures out where B is, who, let's be honest, unless the Raikage like knocks him out, he's probably going to try to help the village. And so once he figures out where B is, I mean, that's literally all he needs to know, and he'll just Chaotic Shinra Tensei the village the exact same way he did against, you know, the Elite Village. So, I mean, and like you said, he can fly. The Pain can fly. Ain't nobody like so. And that's the thing is like I think we're like this is all with us like giving the most credit we can give to the other Jonin because people like C who I mean like you know A thought he was at least good enough to bring him along to the 5 Kage Summit or whatever, but like C kind of comes off more as a support fighter rather than like on like the ground you know combatant, and so like people like that, and we don't have much to go off of the Cloud Village's military. The only thing we can say is like we said at the beginning of the video that like they're, you know, you could make the argument they're one of the best as far as like having the best military, you know, strategies and whatnot, being able to fight, you know, effectively. But outside of that, we don't really have, because for all we know, the Anbu could pull something the same like how the Elite Village Anbu did. We just don't know. So what we have to go off of, I think Pain just rolls up on the Cloud Village like it's just another day for him. If not easier than it was for the Elite Village, because the Elite Village he had to search for Naruto who wasn't even in the village. But if B makes his presence known in any way, like he's able, like he's liable to do with his raps or just energetic nature, then Pain's just gonna go ahead and blow it up anyway. So either way, Pain kind of comes out on top. I think the hardest round he would have is probably against A and B separately. That way they can all, you know, try to tag team all 6 at the same time instead of being dispersed. But even then Pain still wins that. It's all about the intel, y'all. Like it's like I know we're sounding redundant, but the intel is the hugest problem for people who fight Pain. I think I could see people getting onto us in the comments and sections like saying we're sleeping on A and B specifically, but like aside from the Bija bombs, they're one trick pony when it comes to combat, and it's all about speed blitzing. And while they are incredibly fast and that the speed could give Pain a problem, the intel going in is going to be the hugest issue, on top of, you know, being able to have the vision extended by the 6 paths and the animal summons, plus Chaotic Shinra Tensei, plus Yubaku Tensei. I don't know. I just don't. I told this to Virtue before we started recording. Personally, I think Guy in the 7th gate would do better against Pains than A and B would together, because he has both speed and long range attacks. So, but that's what I think.
No, I'm totally with you. I'm on every page you got.
All right, well, that's gonna be it for the video. Hope y'all enjoyed the video. Hope y'all enjoyed it just as much as you did the Naruto versus Taka video. We kind of want to do the same format as that, so hope y'all enjoyed just as much. Thank you, Virtue, for being on the channel again.
Yeah, anytime.
Make sure you go subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll leave a link for his channel in the description below. Thank you all for watching to the end if you have. Stay tuned. Till the next one, like the snow. Out.
Peace.